live here at AIIM. We're still alive, which is fantastic. Yeah, and I'm joined here by Gerry Guilbeault. He is from CIBC, and Jed Cawthorne. He's from NetDocuments. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the changes in intelligent information management and what we're seeing at the show and what we want to see in our businesses a little bit. So, Gerry, you're a customer. Love you so much. Thank you for that. We've had an evolution since the way we started. We started with the ECM product, an additive product for your open text instance. Got to know each other well, and then asked, what else can we do? And the conversation turned to understanding content outside of ECM, and then it evolved into all sorts of amazing things. Is that something that was intuitive when you first started the ECM journey, that we needed to do this extra, or is it something that evolved as part of the program?
When you start the ECM journey, you have a defined set of goals that says we're going to capture this sort of document as a record or as a work paper, whatever the case may be. But as you start turning over those layers, you begin to realize that, this goes a lot deeper than just our records. And we have documents from a long time ago. We don't know what their value is because nobody's touched them in a number of years. But we also don't know, in a highly regulated situation as the banking industry is, whether it's something we can eliminate just based on chronology. So the analysis tool that Shinydocs has provided has given us an insight into some of that content. And we expect it to be more and more as we continue to explore that.
Yeah, thanks, Gerry. And I'm seeing it on the show floor up there. 20 or 30 years ago, it might have been, okay, here's how you do storage and backup. And then 10 years ago, it would be about, here's a new buckets that you can put information in with value like ECMs. And now there's more analytics, process automation. Yeah. It seems like people are getting that message that you discovered, Gerry.
Well, and even on the new information that's being captured, the level of volume that is being captured daily, and in the Venn diagram is we've got the excess, we've got the records, and then there's that area in the middle that nobody has decided, is that a record, is it excess? I need it today, will I need it in 6 years because the regulators are going to ask for it? And being able to constantly review that through system learning, machine learning, is going to be invaluable.
Yeah.
So I think there's an interesting, I was going to say tension, I'm not sure if it's a tension, but in between yesterday's keynote where we're talking of the AIIM membership about moving the needle for the business, not everything being about regulation and risk. And then this morning, the wonderful speaker who's written the book, Flip the Risk, and we're back to talking about risk again, and regulatory drivers and how long you've got to keep stuff. But when I worked in a bank, there was also a reason to keep stuff for that long tail of information. Not just because the regulator says so, but because it helps with know your customer, or the long analytics of discovering trends and that trend analysis. So I think, I don't know what you guys think, I think that it's been a really interesting, it's not a dichotomy, but it's two different ends of a spectrum as to why we should keep stuff, why we should know what we're keeping, which is really the crux of the matter.
I would agree with that, Jed. And recently I got invited to join the AIIM board, and it was on the strength of exactly what you were saying, is the idea of information governance shouldn't be at the end of a barrel. It shouldn't be because you must do X. It should always work backwards from what's the business value and how is it driving business value, and how can I make the governance a byproduct of the good business work that we're doing, rather than I'm over here doing my governance thing, get out of my way. This is important. It reminds me of Douglas Adams' Puddle, where it's if you're not familiar with the story, it's where a puddle, it becomes sentient, and it feels like it's just perfect for this hole that it's in, and it's just amazing for this exact existence, and it doesn't even realize it as it eventually evaporates away. And I think the same kind of thing happens with certain information governance programs, is that it's so perfect in its own right. We got the crown jewels of the organization and we're doing exactly the right thing for them and all that. But then there's a board or a CEO who's getting comped on profit, getting comped on margin. And they look at that and go, am I accepting the risk of not having perfection in my organization? Check. And next thing you know, this perfect part of the organization disappears, like Douglas Adams' puddle.
Yeah.
So I think it becomes our job to align with the business so that we never have that evaporation.
But we need to find the balance. And I think that's a key thing, that we don't go too far in any one direction, because we want to derive business value, but Gerry's in a regulated industry. And NetDocuments works a lot with lawyers and the legal industry, and regulatory requirements are there, and sometimes they have to be the driver too. And that can absolutely push against the idea of business value. So I think we need to find the balance.
And I'm not sure I should say this on camera, but what I've told the organization time and again is that information governance is as much an art as it is a science, because knowledge management is out of the scope of information governance from the pure regulatory standpoint. There is information that is 15 years old, 20 years old. We have clients in our universe that we've had for generations. And sometimes we get asked, why did they buy this diamond or car or whatever in 1972? And there is information around that is valuable. And
absolutely.
It's valuable to the client. The fact that we can provide it means that we provide that value to the client, so our standing with the client steps up. If it was just based on records management, which is where my portfolio is, I may have said before I gained this additional knowledge, oh, you got to get rid of that.
Yeah, defensible disposition. You may have said, that's 15 years old, we're going to get rid of it. And then you would have lost that business value.
Yes. And the client would say, well, what am I paying you for? In that regard. Now, with the privacy regulations that are coming out and all of the risk associated with cyber crimes, we want to explain to them that there is the feature to having that knowledge, and then there is the risk to having that knowledge. And the dichotomy is there, and we've got to find that balance. And then, of course, the internal wisdom that comes from data is very valuable to our decision making if we can do that in an anonymized fashion so that it's not attached to a specific customer with personally identifiable information. And that's a challenge too. But that's something that I'm expecting that some of the tools that you're providing are going to allow us to do in the future.
And it's and certainly that is available to you now. You can find abstractly every name, every social insurance number, all of those personally identifiable pieces of information. They come with the models that you've already purchased. But you're hitting in on kind of a key element, is that all of this, what it means to be valuable to the organization, is kind of proprietary human knowledge. Like, I need to know why they bought a car or a diamond in your case. And so we need to be told, we as the information governance professional need to work with the business unit to say, well, which one of these are actually valuable for analytics? What do you need to predict in the future? And they're not ready to have that conversation yet. They're like, I don't know, keep it all. And it's so that's an area of development I know for myself, perhaps for all of the IT professionals, is getting better at drawing out of the business these requirements. Because then when we get those requirements, the tools actually work. I can say, first, boom, we'll find every person's name, we'll redact it, it's going to be completely clean, you can use the analytics tools to verify it, then you can start being predictive based upon the business requirements. We already have all of that technology. And I don't just mean us. I mean, there's
in the industry.
In the industry, you can assemble a very powerful system to do all of these things. And it's just how do we get the tip of the business to kind of lean in and help us build out that model?
I think that's a key point. How many decades have we talked about bridging the business IT divide?
All of them.
I might have it on my resume. I think, I'm very good at bridging the business IT divide and having those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But I think your point that I picked up on is we need to be more integrative. So you mentioned knowledge management.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a member of the conference board of Canada's knowledge management group. And you can have endless debates as what is knowledge management. Doesn't matter. Knowledge management is whatever it means to CIBC. Mm-hmm. In your context. But the key thing is to not forget about it and to take that top-down kind of approach to, do we need to keep this? Why might we need to keep this? How long might we need to keep this? And just have those discussions with the business experts, because they are the experts. They're the subject matter experts for their particular line of business. And as the wonderful lady in the keynote said, we have to learn to listen.
Mm-hmm. And attached on that is, why do they need it? And again, we get back to the idea of balancing it against the risk of keeping it.
Yep.
And that risk can be mitigated in the easiest way, and I've said this to you before, no properly eliminated document has ever been breached.
Right.
But then we lose that knowledge. So then what firewalls can we put around that information that's going to protect it and make it accessible when it needs to be drawn on? Mm-hmm. And that goes back when I was more paper oriented, and it was always the balance in records management between access and control, and it's still the same case now.
We just replaced the warehouses with disk drives.
Right, exactly.
And copies of files and the ability to easily distribute it around the world. And so the risk is greater, the amount of data is greater. However, I think we're on the right track in that we're doing a better job of identifying those records. You would have never, if you didn't have effective cataloging when you would put something in the box, the only way to figure out what's in the box is do the work, reduce the entropy. However, now we can automate that process. Go in and find every word on every page on that disk so that you can effectively say, I'm confident that we have all of the documents here. Now, IT professional, can you be confident that you've secured it now that I've identified what it is? So there's power in knowledge, and having this knowledge right now allows you to do things that we could have never done with that box that we kept in the corner locked.
Both of us as vendors with slightly different products that do different things, but we're trying to help the customer achieve the single source of truth. So dedupes, no different versions of files scattered on different drives. You guys can go out and find it. I would say, we're very good when you found that single source of truth, of keeping it as the single source of truth and allowing you to work with the versions and doing all that good stuff. So the tools are there, but the customer has to do the hard work, because Gerry's got to do all that figuring out of his strategy and what he needs to keep and what he doesn't.
Right. And the cultural change that has to take place when we have, in various groups where they've had this generational relationship with their customers, they've learned over time we have to have everything. And even though if there is in one of the back office groups, they have all those records, we still want them accessible at our fingertips. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the challenges that we're facing right now is, okay, we're just going to give you a link. Oh no, that's not good enough. We need to have that document. Ooh. And so we've stopped telling them that it's a link. You're going to need to edit that out. Because it looks the same on the screen
you click
as
the button,
document
the document
name
comes up.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just perception management at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I like that, Gerry, because and I love that Peggy in her keynote yesterday said, we were wrong about the idea that we're going to get buy-in. We were wrong about the idea that you need the right executive to enforce what's going to happen. And I love that acknowledgement, because we've seen it and you've experienced it day in and day out. It's nobody's job at CIBC to be a records manager, but your organization, even though it should be everybody's job to benefit from records management.
Yes.
So we need to figure out a strategy for that.
And that's the cultural shift that we are attempting to make, in that the lines of business need to become responsible for their records. In the past, and even maybe now, it's a record, so it's records management's issue. A records management will tell you from a consultative basis, here's how you should handle these things. But ultimately, you assign the value, you assign the custodian, you assign all of the administrative things around that particular document, and then we just tell you, because of those rules you set up, here's how long you should keep it.
Yeah, the SMEs have to be responsible.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then when we get to that dark data area, which is where the tool is, we're looking for it to help us quite a bit, the same thing's got to happen. And that's some heavy lifting. Not from a categorization standpoint, but just give us the rules that you want to go by.
Yeah, and once we identify the dark data, like we identify it in a sense abstractly until you give it a label. Mm-hmm. If everything is, let's say, a purchase order, we can identify it. Hey, Jerry, these 20,000 documents or 200,000 documents are all kind of the same, but your knowledge or your business's knowledge needs to be applied to that. So that's a purchase order, and these fields here are the ones that are important to us. Yep. And then the model gets developed, and boom, it turns from data now to information.
Right. And that's the key. The context, adding the context. When I say that's the key, it's the key to answering one of Peggy's questions from yesterday. Do we work with data or do we work with information? We work with both. Mm-hmm. And we also work with knowledge. What steps it along the path? The context. Add in the context. The business smarts around that raw data turns it into information. Experts like you, with the business experts, can then turn it into knowledge that is reusable. But I think we as a table have just solved everything that Peggy threw at us yesterday.
I think we did. We just got to get the word out in an effective way. And we need to say no to something. I'll tell a story that it's not my story. It's Cheryl Smith's, who wrote an amazing book. It's available on Amazon about digital transformation. Mm-hmm. And she's the former CIO at WestJet.
Yep.
And she was there when the demand came to IT. CIO, of course, looks after IT. The demand was, we need Wi-Fi on our planes for consumers. That's an IT thing. And she rejected that and said, we will provide you the best advice on how to secure that. We will provide you the best advice on how to implement that. And this is a for-profit business element that you need to market, sell, take risk associated with how many people are going to buy it, and take quota associated with how many people are going to buy it. So when you figure all of that out, and we're happy to help, then we can help you, the business, implement Wi-Fi on the planes.
Yeah.
And that blew the business's mind, because I feel like a lot of IT organizations say, the business comes and says, well, I need you to do this with data. And the IT goes, I guess data's ours, so we'll go up.
We'll try.
Yeah. They light a lantern and then go back into the dark room and see if they can figure it out. And if we think about it in terms of Cheryl Smith's Wi-Fi example, I love the pushback quickly saying, you got some homework to do. Here's all of the homework you need to do. We're happy to help. We agree. This is part of our mantra to help you with this. But it's not our product. This is not our solution to deliver and make profit for the organization.
That's right. Because you've got to think of it as a product. Mm-hmm. It was a product for them to sell to their passengers.
Yeah, so all those records that you described, whether it's the typical mortgage application or anything like that, or if it's that specific example of the diamond or the car that somebody purchased, this is an asset that has business value. And the question isn't, hey Jerry, why didn't you give me all the business value? The question should be, okay, hey business, you know how to run your business. What are you willing to take quota on so that then I can fuel you with the right data? It just inverts the problem, and all of a sudden we're not the bad guy anymore. Now they're the person who has some homework has to draw it out of us.
And I think we're seeing more and more organizations develop their data management groups to be able to ask those questions, so that, and Peggy mentioned it in the keynote yesterday, is that what problem are you trying to solve?
Yep, ask the right question.
And from there, okay, that means we need to collect these data elements for you. And even when we collect the data elements, we're not going to interpret them. We're just going to give them to you in a fashion that you can understand what they mean.
Yep.
So whether it's demographics around where are we making the most loans, or whether it is just how many loans did we do last year and are they going up or going down, all of that's good data. But the business has to say what it's useful for and how long is it going to be useful versus getting stale.
And again, none of this is new, right? I mean, certainly for Jason and I, and I'm not sure about your background, Gerry, but when a customer or a business team comes to you and says, I want A, my answer is, no, what problem are you trying to solve? Mm-hmm. Because what solves your problem might be B. But they'll come along because they think they've figured it out. And I want A. No, I don't care what you want. I want to know what the problem is that you're trying to solve.
When we were first, and I was working in the warehouses in the paper industry, and we were starting to offer a digitization service, one of the first slides that I produced for a presentation was, don't give them what they want, give them what they need.
Yeah.
So you have to ask those questions. What are you trying to get to?
Yeah.
Because in some cases, we didn't want them to digitize it because the paper was only going to last 7 years. You stick it in a warehouse, and that's $20 to store it. And then it's going to go away. And then
it's gone.
And the information wasn't of any value.
Right.
But then, of course, the longer-term relationships, and not that you didn't want to stick it in the warehouse or you needed to review it every 2 months or something, the price went up. But again, it goes back to not what do they want, because our customers, internal and external, all have tunnel vision, and they're only trying to solve today's problem, which I don't blame them for, because they've got to get through their day.
Yeah.
But long term, what's sustainable? What information can we give you that's going to have value over the course of years versus the course of weeks?
It reminds me of the enterprise software dilemma that started at the beginning of the web back between 1993 and, let's say, 2003. Everybody built a platform, and every customer on that platform would say, I'm a unique flower, I need you to customize the Jesus out of this particular, whether it's
fit my need.
Yeah, SharePoint or an open text or your SAP, and everybody had these Frankenstein systems. And then they went through, my next upgrade's going to cost me the same amount as the implementation or more. And then now, in 2022, generally customers are more experienced, and they'll say, tell me what I can do out of the box.
Without the gnarly customization.
Exactly. So I think we need the business user to think that same way now. As IT professionals, we've learned that you don't want to just give the customer exactly what they want. You need to identify what is sustainable, help the customer understand what is sustainable, and say, this is why we're implementing it to you. So the big why matters more than the what as to what you're going to deliver for them.
But it was hard-won experience for the IT industry.
Oh yeah.
Right? We've struggled to come to that conclusion, and now we need to help our business colleagues understand the same problem from their perspective.
Yeah, I think business users too are perceiving it either as we're being lazy maybe, and we're not answering their question, or they don't want to lower their standards. And I think of a good example that might be anecdotal, but you hear stories of Ford was selling so many cars in the early years that they had so many orders that they couldn't actually figure out how many cars that they sold to be able to pay taxes. So they identified the average value of a sale, and then they weighed their orders.
Right.
Literally, physically, the mass of their orders, divided that by how much the average order per pound was, and that's how much they paid taxes on. Obviously, very lossy. It's not precise, and I have a feeling like that's something that the business users of today perceive, is they're like, well, I want perfect AI that's going to give me this exact answer, and we come back and say, we can give you something predictive that's going to be about 60% effective, which is going to inform you, but you have to make a decision. And they're like, nah, AI is stupid. And it's like, I don't know, 60% is pretty good, and the more you use it, it'll get better and better and better.
Yeah.
And if you don't start doing it now, and your competitor's doing it, they'll be miles ahead of you in 10 years.
Yeah.
It's a tough discussion. So is it...
Perfect is the enemy of the good enough.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So is there a sense that your business user doesn't want to lower their standards to the thing that you propose to them?
I think that it's more an understanding of what is possible.
Sure.
Within, if you have unlimited resources, unlimited budget, yes, you can get to that perfection. And then when you acquire the next company, you're right back at square one because they're doing something else and you didn't build something that was sustainable.
Yeah.
So it's looking, again, beyond today's need to what's going to be the need in 2025 or whenever.
That's a fantastic point because you've got everything just sorted. You think you've got it how you need it, and then mergers and acquisitions happen, and now you've got to integrate another 200 people and thousands and thousands of documents.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of the show, and thanks for talking
Thank you.
today. It was great.
Thank you,
Great.
Jason.